Welcome back to the House of the Dragon recap show, The Iron Couch. I'm Mike, the uneducated man, and today we're going to be doing Season 1, Episode 8. About 6 years have gone by since our last episode. I think that should be our last time jump, I'm pretty sure.
Next Saturday night, we're sending you back to the future!
But in that time, Corlys Velaryon dipped out to go fight in the Stepstones again and got himself jacked up. So he's wounded, and Rhaenys and Daemon's daughters are kind of going over it with his brother, who thinks they should basically just write him off for dead and let him take the throne over there at Driftmark. Now Vaemond and Rhaenys and everybody else knows that Corlys wanted Driftmark to go to Rhaenyra's son, Luke. But Vaemond ain't having it. He's been snorting Lowry's or something because he coming out spicy as f***. Rhaenys wants Laena's daughter, Baela, to go ahead and succeed Corlys instead, or herself, instead of Vaemond, or Luke. This kind of sets House Velaryon against itself, but it also sets everybody up to meet at King's Landing to go over this again. Vaemond shows up with a few dudes trying to be a baller. He comes in there, speaks on the bloodlines and all this kind of stuff. And with him talking everything about his true bloodline and his house and all that, despite the fact that he is kind of a dick, he's not really wrong. See, the whole thing was basically a plan by Otto, since Corlys might die, to go ahead and push Rhaenyra and her kids out. See, the last 6 years have been really horrible on the king's health. Like, the dude is dying. And with him being so sick, Otto's the one who's been sitting on the Iron Throne. Pretty clever plan, really. He had everything all wrapped up, and it would have worked out, too.
Yes, and I'd have gotten away with it, too. If it wasn't for these blasted kids and their dog.
No. If it wasn't for this magnificent bastard here. They've had our boy all doped up on milk of the poppy for years. So this scene of him walking down when he really couldn't even get out of bed hardly is pretty powerful. It's a really great scene. But we'll get to the king in a minute. Let's go ahead and finish all this other nonsense with Vaemond. And let's find out how he feels about his claims to Driftmark being shut down again. I'm sure he's going to handle it in a dignified...
Our children are bastards!
So I'm not really sure why Rhaenys wants to hang out and watch while the Silent Sisters prepare Vaemond and his tongue for being buried back home on Driftmark, but okay. In a lot of ways, Vaemond was kind of a pain in the ass to Princess Rhaenys, so maybe she just really liked getting to see him get what was coming. During her talk with Vaemond, it was pretty clear that she wanted the Driftwood throne, either for herself or for her granddaughter. And yeah, he's been kind of a pain in her ass. When she had her talk with Rhaenyra later, it seemed like, yeah, that was in fact the plan, was for her to go ahead and take control of Driftmark. She even rejected a proposal for her granddaughters to marry Rhaenyra's kids, which would really make them a lady and the queen of the entire kingdom. Until...
King Viserys of House Targaryen, the first of his name, King of the Andals.
So let's talk about Rhaenyra and Daemon's little kingdom on Dragonstone. They seem like they've been pretty busy over the last 6 years, since we see a couple more kids. They get the note about Vaemond talking shit, and they know that that means he's challenging her son's claim, which pretty much brings everybody's claims into question. So they pack up and roll out to King's Landing to go try to settle this. Again. After they get a really frosty welcome, they go inside and they see that half the Targaryen banners and everything have been pulled down and replaced with the stars from the Seven. So that's kind of strange. Rhaenyra and Daemon go to see the king and try to get his support, but they find him just sick, not even able to get out of bed, and constantly drinking milk of the poppy, just all doped up. He looks so bad, even Daemon looks shocked and sad. It's pretty hard to do. After that, they go have a meeting with Alicent, and that doesn't go great. But it also goes way too easy for Alicent because she gets to roll out of there looking smug like she's got all the things figured out. So Rhaenyra knows that her father's too sick to help. That leaves Alicent and Otto in power and basically in a great position to go ahead and push her and her kids completely out. So she's really not sure what to do. She really needs allies. So she goes and talks to Rhaenys. She offers Luke and everything with a marriage proposal for her granddaughters. And despite that, Rhaenys doesn't seem to want to have anything to do with her. She still blames her for the death of at least her son, and blames Daemon for the death of her daughter. Rhaenyra feels pretty defeated, so she goes to see her dad again, but he's so out of it he can barely talk. So she rolls up in front of the Iron Throne with only her family to back her up, and before she really has much of a chance to speak, this happens.
Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and protector of the realm.
Alicent and Otto. No doubt for the last 6 years they've had their hands full dealing with Aegon's drunk ass and Aemon One-Eye, the possible psychopath. Now, who and when decided to go ahead and keep the king doped up 24 hours a day isn't really made clear. But by doing that, it does make Otto and Alicent the undisputed rulers of the Seven Kingdoms. Alicent does seem a little scared still about playing this game, and Otto definitely isn't telling her half of whatever it is he's doing in the background. Cleaning up Aegon's messes seems to be a pretty much daily occurrence for Alicent. She doesn't make it 2 steps out of the council meeting before one of the twins decides to tell her that, well, there's a serving girl that Aegon serviced and left crying, and she's going to go have to deal with all that. For some reason, we're subjected to Aegon's pasty white ass again when she goes to scream at him because he's basically worthless up until this point. So it probably isn't great that she went right from having to deal with that idiot to meeting up with Daemon and Rhaenyra, who were, well, pissed. She doesn't try to stab anybody this time.
No! Please! Help! Stop it!
But she doesn't really seem much friendlier than the last time, so that's not great. After that, she's got to go meet with Vaemond, and despite all that, she's still a little reluctant to just throw Rhaenyra and her kids under the bus. But Otto decides he's going all in with Vaemond and his claim, and we really get to see like how much power Otto has these days and how much he loves that. We also get an idea that it might be him and maybe even the Maesters that have pretty much kept the king out of the way. As soon as Otto climbs up and sits on the Iron Throne, you can see how happy it makes him. He's ready, and Alicent's ready, and everything's set for them to just go ahead and push Rhaenyra out. And then... the return of the king. I've said more than once that this show has some impressive entrances, but I think this one's got all the rest of them beat. Every episode, he's looked worse and worse. Every time we've seen him, he's been less coherent. He's been weaker, thinner. And now he rolls out one-armed, barely able to stand, it seems like, and manages to walk all the way to the throne. It's a really powerful walk. And, man, this dude deserves so many awards for this. He plays the hell out of this role. If this doesn't show the strength that this old man has, the love for his family that he has, then I don't know what can. He makes the climb up to the throne, surprisingly with some help from Daemon, who picks up his crown for him and gives it back, in definitely the most, touching scene that Daemon's had in the whole show. So, now that the king's back on the throne, he goes to bat for his daughter, and even Rhaenys decides to jump up and get behind her at this point. Despite how weak he is, the king even pulls out a dagger whenever Vaemond decides he's going to talk all kinds of crap, and opens his mouth for the last time. See, Vaemond made the classic mistake of calling Rhaenyra's kids bastards! So instead of the king having to bother himself, cutting out his tongue, Daemon went ahead and just took the top of his head and turned him into one of those weird Canadians from South Park.
I'm not your buddy, friend. He's not your friend, guy. I'm not your guy, buddy.
So after all that craziness, we get a scene that also really, really made me happy. Maybe I'm just getting old and sentimental, but we get a dinner with the king and his whole family, everybody. The Greens and the Blacks sitting on either side of him. After a really touching speech where he takes his mask off and we see just how bad his disease has gotten. He's lost his eye. He's got a hole in his face. You can see his teeth through his face. It's rough. But after that, he finally gets what he wants and what he's wanted for this whole show so far. He gets everybody to sit down together and at least act like they like each other for a little while. He gets to relax and have his peace with his family and the people that he cares about, even if it's only for a couple minutes. The toasts that were given, mostly, seemed to be really heartfelt and the kind of things that could have ended all the arguments and gotten everybody back together as one house. It seemed like it was so close to happening. Like we were so close to skipping all the horror that's going to be coming. Now, after that touching scene, 4 seconds after the king leaves, Alicent's kids decide to completely take things south and start talking shit.
That escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Things don't really get to escalate too far before everybody gets separated and Rhaenyra takes her crew back to Dragonstone. But not before having a really kind of touching moment with Alicent, where it seems like they really genuinely want to squash everything and be friends again. She promises to come back the next day on her dragon, just to come hang out. Now, if everything would have just ended right there, would have been great. If nothing else would have gone down, there would have been no problem. But one more thing just had to happen to set green against black and start a war. And it's not even anything hateful. It's just a misunderstanding. Really, it just comes down to some of the last words of a dying man. He's confused and he's basically answering Rhaenyra's questions, but answering them to Alicent. Now, in my opinion, this is probably a good reason not to name all of your kids Aegon, because then you have no idea who's talking about what.
Hey, can you repeat the part of the stuff where you said all about the things?
And after all that, our king finally dies. So now who's wrong? Who's right? As far as Alicent's concerned, the king just gave her everything she needed to know to go ahead and put her son Aegon on the throne, thinking this is what the king really wanted. Rhaenyra knows everything she knows because of her and her father's talks, but who's really right? Who's really wrong? From the perspective of either side, they're both doing what the king wanted. Now I want to know where everybody else stands in the comments. Are you behind the Greens? Behind the Blacks? Who is right? So far, the dinner, out of everything, out of all the great scenes we've had, has been my favorite scene in the show. And like I said, maybe I'm getting old.
I'm too old for this shit.
Maybe I'm getting sentimental. But it was great seeing this guy only show strength through the whole show so far when it came to family. And then he finally gets his peaceful dinner with his family. Just once. Patty Constantine? You know who you are. You deserve all the awards. All of them. You made Viserys, who really just was more or less a placeholder in the books, into a really, really powerful and tragic character. A really great character. So, good job. The way they've made certain changes and filling in the details with this character have been awesome. I've enjoyed all of this so far. So even though, the dinner scene was my favorite scene, it's very, very close with the king's walk to the throne. That was amazing. That was an awesome scene all by itself. The music, the tone, everything was spectacular. And having his crown put back on by Daemon was also a really great touch. It's not often you get to see any kind of real affection or love between the brothers, and it was good that they threw that in. So at the dinner, all the adults basically seem to come to an understanding, and it's pretty clear that it's Aegon and Aemond who are kind of the assholes. Aegon in particular just can't stop running his mouth through the whole dinner and almost starts a fist fight between everyone. And it ends up with Aemond and Daemon having a nice little stare down. Keep that in mind for later, too. Aemond and Daemon. Stupid, identical Targaryen naming nonsense. That's why things are going to go bad. Just because of that, something that dumb. Stupid names. So for now, all we can really do is sit back and wait for the consequences of a dying old man's last words and see how the Queen and Rhaenyra react to that. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and don't forget to go in the comments and let me know where you stand with the greens or the blacks.